Good evening and welcome. My name is David Skidmore. I'm a professor in Drake's Department of Political Science, and I'll be moderating our event tonight, which features three distinguished panelists on the topic of a hopeful Afghanistan. The event is sponsored by the 1208 Foundation, about which more will be said in a moment. Also, Afghan partners in Iowa and Drake's Bright College. Also, I'd like to thank a number of individuals for their help in organizing tonight's activities, including Craig Owens, the Dean of Bright College, Administrative Assistant Sophia Turnbull, Chris Covington, and Safi Shur. So Safi, I should mention, is an Afghan combat veteran and also a student in Bright College. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. So just to immediately to my left is Lieutenant General Sami Sadat. His leadership of troops under his command in fighting the Taliban in the last 8 months of the war is chronicled in the documentary film Retrograde that was produced by Bakhtash Ahadi and directed by Matthew Heineman. We will be viewing clips from the film tonight, interspersed with discussion from the panelists. General Sadat served as the last commander of Afghanistan Special Forces. He received extensive education in various Western military academies. He continues to speak out on behalf of a more open and inclusive future for Afghanistan. We're going to use first names tonight because we have two General Sadats on the panel. So just to
the tall Sadat and the short.
Just to the right of Sami is Khoshal Sadat. He is a former Deputy Minister of the Interior and a Brigadier General in charge of Afghanistan's National Police. He was a graduate of the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, England. General Sadat worked closely with U.S. General Stan McChrystal, both during and after the latter's service as commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And then we have Thomas Kasza. Is that
good enough? Yeah.
Okay, Thomas Kasza, former Green Beret Special Forces officer, who served tours of duty in both Iraq and Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, he served as manager of National Mine Removal Group 11 of the Afghanistan National Army. He's currently a graduate student at Georgetown University and executive director of the 1208 Foundation, which engages in both advocacy and fundraising on behalf of Afghan military veterans of the National Mine Removal Group who have immigrated or seek to immigrate out of Afghanistan. So as mentioned, we will be alternating between clips from the film Retrograde and panel discussion tonight. We'll also leave room near the end for audience questions. The film Retrograde doesn't attempt to provide a comprehensive view of the American withdrawal from Afghanistan and the Taliban takeover of the country. Rather, the film views these events through the eyes of General Sami Sadat and those around him, as well as the perspective of an American Special Forces unit and the Afghan mine clearance group with whom they partner. The film also examines the chaotic scenes of the final evacuation of Americans and Afghans from the airport in Kabul. So let's begin with a clip from the film focused on the impact of President Biden's public announcement of the withdrawal decision. Could we have some light? Sami, was President Biden's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan, was that a surprise to you or something that you expected? And what was your initial reaction when you heard the news?
Thank you, Dr. Skidmore. Excuse me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be here. We were completely blindsided, and if anything, we thought like, oh, Trump is crazy, he got to deal with our enemy, and Biden is a more rational person, he's a seasoned politician, he might reconsider this, and Biden is the guy who would listen to the American generals. Unfortunately, we were all wrong, and it was Biden who immediately pulled the plug. Not only the Afghan side was blindsided, but I think the entire security apparatus of the United States was blindsided too. Because anything with the Afghan and US military thought that this is a temporary agreement with the Taliban. The Taliban are going to breach the agreement, and we're back in the game, and we're going to, fight the Taliban.
Yeah. So, Khosh, how did the decision affect morale among Afghan troops and the civilian leadership of the Afghan government?
So thank you for this opportunity. I want to highlight what Sami mentioned, and then I'll come to what the morale part of it was. So prior to the retrograde, about 2.5-3 years ago, or 2019, when the Doha peace deal or peace negotiations had started, the U.S. representative, Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, had been portraying the Taliban as the changed Taliban, the Taliban 2.0. They've learned their lessons of fighting the war for 20 years. They've cut the ties with Al-Qaeda, and encouraged President Trump and later Biden that having a peace deal with the Taliban will allow a honorable departure of American troops, and also create an opportunity for the negotiations with the Afghan government, with us, to sit down and create a new unity government. And there were some control measures that the U.S. or checks that they've conducted on the Taliban, if it was reduction of violence or not attacking specific areas. And also there were committees that were observing who's violating the reduction of violence. But it was all, as we know later, it was all a game. But the news of all these weekly or monthly news of all these negotiations between the United States and the Taliban in Doha had been a sign of betrayal. It's been a frustrating sign to all of us, of course, the U.S. military service members as well, that here are the people that, besides attacking the United States in 2001, but killing thousands and thousands of Afghan innocent people, as well as U.S. and Afghan service members. And here's the superpower having to negotiate with them. So that really sort of created doubts amongst the Afghan government and security forces that why are we fighting them if we're negotiating with them?
Yeah, and just to be clear, the Afghan government was not involved in those negotiations. It was excluded from the negotiations that just included the U.S. government and the Taliban, right?
That's correct. So one of the reasons, I think that proposal was suggested initially to have a tripartite negotiations, but the Taliban clearly said if they had the U.S. on the hook, that look, America is weakened and they want to talk to us. They said, no, we do not want to talk to you, as they refer to our government as puppets. We only want to talk to you. And U.S. every step of the way had relinquished or bowed down to Taliban's demands.
Mm-hmm. So, Thomas, the emotions that were on display in the scene where your Green Beret unit met with your Afghan partners following the withdrawal announcement, really made clear the deep bond among the men on both sides. even under the most difficult circumstances. Could you talk about that moment and about the connections that persist to this day between the Americans and the Afghans?
Yeah, so I just want to correct one thing you said earlier regarding the NRG. They were not actually members of the Afghan National Army. They were specifically contracted to work on our behalf. So the NRG's roots actually went back as early as 2002. For example, my counterpart within I was the manager, my director, literally started working for the U.S. in 2002. We didn't get him out until August 31st of last year, so 2022. So within that span, he had literally worked for the U.S. for 19 years. Being a veteran, people love to thank me for my service, all the stuff that kind of, it's great, it kind of gets old, but if you want to talk service, especially services rendered to the United States government, look at these guys. 19 years of consecutive combat. It just boggles the mind. They can't even now, it's hard to really capture the words that kind of describe that level of sacrifice on our behalf, not their government. I mean, granted, yeah, they were trying to fight for a freer Afghanistan, but they were there to more or less take an IED blast so that I didn't have to. So there's a tremendous moral injury in the fact that these guys are still there, and it's not the government who's trying to get these guys back. It's people like myself. I know there's many veterans in this audience right now who are, or even just regular volunteers, Chris among them, who have kind of gone out of their way to kind of sacrifice their own time, money, and, to be honest, mental health in, kind of rectifying our own government's mistakes. And to kind of go even further, how pervasive this issue is, the thing that kind of differentiates Green Berets versus Navy SEALs is that we are purely reliant on our partner forces. We operate through and with them rather than as a unilateral unit. So rather than 80 Green Berets storming one objective, it would be 12 Green Berets, a couple guys from the 82nd, and then 60 Afghan commandos who are taking the full blast of the Taliban's wrath, so to speak. The fact that we're just kind of more or less, no, I'm going to say we, meaning the government, kind of just wash our hands of this, incredible issue, incredible moral injury, and just carrying on as if nothing happened. It's very, I'd say unconscionable. There's pretty much no other word before it.
I just had one other question for you, Tom, about just something that struck me as odd, that the America's units were told not to pass along the weapons that they were not taking back to the U.S., that they were to destroy them rather than pass them along to our Afghan partners. I saw that was a point of frustration. Do you happen to know why what's the rationale behind that?
No one does. No one knows. I get it. It's like the most unfulfilling answer you can ever have. I don't know, but that's the truth.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, that makes it even more frustrating. All right. So, Chris, if you could play the next two clips back to back, that would be great. Thank you.
دغه ځای زموږ لپاره ډېر مهمه ده، چون که دغه خط شاته راشي او راورسېږي نو بیخي د ښار ته
همون مراسمش هم اجرا می‌کنیم. بله.
Thank you. I'm going to start with you, Sami. One of the things that comes up in this clip and others in the film is the problem with ammunition. And it seems like it was difficult to get the ammunition that you needed at critical moments. Where did that problem arise from? Was it just not enough ammunition in the stockpiles, or was it a matter of getting the ammunition that was available to the right places? And, yeah, go ahead.
So both of them, we didn't have enough ammunition in the country to begin with. Most of our arms shipments were halted after the Doha Agreement in an attempt to reduce violence, i.e. meaning the Americans pulled out of the war, the Afghans were told to halt all offensive operations, and how do you do that? Of course, we wouldn't listen, and so we kind of stopped sending all the ammunition packages. And once they were inside Afghanistan, all the corps were fighting for a portion of ammunition. So of course there was competition, and some would get more, some would get less.
Okay. So you were known as a very effective and respected commander, and were able to keep your troops motivated and disciplined. What are the essential qualities of a commander?
I think teamwork is essential, and I think team is the most important thing in a military mission, in any mission I'd say, but the military mission is much more important. People who understand you, and people you understand and you trust, and in team the most important thing that keeps everyone together is trust. And you have to give trust before you gain trust. So you have to trust your man first, so they can trust you back, and that means letting them make their own decisions sometimes, letting them plan things, letting them come up with proposals so you can support. So these are the things that can help you build that. The second thing is really intelligence, understanding what's going on exactly on your side and on the enemy side, and then prioritizing based on what you can do immediately, and then what you can do in the long run.
Thank you. Kosh, you had a pretty close view of the government leadership. What were some of the problems that you saw at the central government level, or even the provincial government level, and where did those problems come from?
I think Afghanistan had this clash of generations, I would say. Our generation, we were really 16, 17 years old when 9/11 happened in the US and came to Afghanistan. So for us it took 20 years, just about the right time to get into the leadership position. So this problem of the Afghan government that existed in the Afghan government was the leftover of the Soviet invasion, the war against the Soviets and the Mujahideen that the United States supported at the time. So both of these, so we had the communists, I should say. So there's this conflict between these two groups of people that always fought for position, and they had their own intentions and ambitions, involved corruption, mismanagement. Sami is complaining in the clip we watched that he's fighting Quetta as well as Kabul. Yeah. I mean, the Taliban headquarters were in Pakistan, Quetta, and fighting our own headquarters in Kabul meant they were always putting restraints on him when it came to supplies or doing his mission. So the problem, I guess I could talk a lot more about Afghanistan, about the government of Afghanistan. There are quite a lot of challenges, but really it was the generational issue that I would say they saw us as a threat, a new generation, American trained, trusted by the Americans. They're taking our position. Why are they in this? So that was a view that was seen, but also internal problems that the central government had. Appointments were one of the biggest problems. The president always wanted to appoint people in the provinces, and also we had the chief executive office of the prime minister office in this instance. So there were clashes between those two as well. Who wants to have an appointment in the province for their own interest, and that affected the morale of the troops, because now you have an individual who is there in a position only looking out for himself, for his pockets really, while troops are out there fighting, dying to defend the country.
Thank you. Well, let's move to our next clip.
Taliban has been making rapid territorial gains.
So, Sami, could you talked a little bit in the film, but could you talk a little more about your reaction to the news that President Ghani had fled the country. And what do you think it would have made a difference had he stayed and showed leadership rather than fleeing?
It would have made a difference, but probably not a whole lot difference. Unfortunately, at the time when President Ghani fled, most of our provinces had fallen into the Taliban, except the two places that were still in government control was my previous place, Helmand, and then the city of Kabul. And I think President Ghani fled to avoid the transfer of power into the Taliban with legitimacy. And I mean, we could have protected the city of Kabul for sure, and the chaos as I've seen in the TVs and all that was absolutely avoidable. That was things were manageable. But personally, I had no idea that this would happen. And unfortunately, once people heard that the president had fled, not only the president, our vice president also traveled to one of the valleys to put up a stand in there. So it became very difficult for people like me to hold the city.
So Kosh, I want to ask you about why it was that the government collapsed so quickly. Especially it seemed that some of the governors and some of the commanders made deals with the Taliban to, hand over territory or cities. How did that come about? Why did, there were some areas, and certainly Sami's forces put up a valiant fight, but then in other areas, less so. How did it happen so quickly?
So I think I was just putting four points that culminated to the collapse. The first one was that the United States decided to negotiate with the terrorists. That itself was a huge blow to the morale of all of the Afghans who were involved in the fight. If the United States wanted to leave, they should have left. And throughout this 2 years of negotiations, there were, as I mentioned, the reduction of violence policy. Ambassador Kasza forced our president to release 5,000, 7,000 total at the narcotics, the opium dealers. Released them. Those who had murdered people, there were some who were tried for hanging. So they were all released. And also, in order, the concept, or his concept, was to even the scale between the Taliban and the Afghan government, so they could help for the peace. It would help the peace to start peace negotiations. They had to stop supporting us and allow the Taliban to gain momentum. I'm talking money, bags of money going to the Taliban to buy people, force elders in districts and families, say, here's $10,000 cash. Tell your son, don't be a soldier, you've died for nothing. We've already cut deals with Americans. Why? To our own peoples. And that affects poor Afghans who are in the provinces. It is just the examples. And also, ammunition, we talked about, equipment, laser-guided missiles that were so effective. The second thing was the U.S. policy towards Pakistan. In 20 years, the United States had not had a clear policy towards Pakistan. They've housed Osama bin Laden, they've housed multiple other terrorist leaders, and for 20 years there were, as I say, Fort Benning-sized bases, training Taliban, graduating them, and sending them over the border to kill Americans and Afghans. And you can see it. Americans, you can speak to any U.S. government official or military leaders. And they would lie to you in your face the next day, no, they don't exist. And yet the U.S., in order to appease, to make sure they're on our side, well, let's give them more F-16s, let's give them more cash that they could, to help their economy. It's a nuclear state, let's not let it push them, because otherwise the terrorists will get hold of it. Congress pays, even now, I believe, for 10,000 troops to protect Pakistani nuclear facilities. And they still do. Every June, I heard, is a specific date that they pay the Pakistanis guard force that protects Pakistani. So that was another one that this war could have continued forever. I mean, our forces, I grew up in a special operations community where we were doing raids every night, and Sami was more of leading the entire corps. And I mean, we were killing them every night. The bomb makers, the Taliban, and the Al-Qaeda leaders. The next day, they were all coming across the border. And it was unfair. How many can you kill and capture? So the last one was, of course, our government mismanagement. Appointments in the wrong place. I got, and Sami, we had four positions moved in 2 years. 11 months in one position, 10 months in another one, 5 in another, and it announced, they made him the chief of security for Kabul and appointed me as the mayor. And I was like, what do I do? What is a mayor? Google, what is a mayor's job? The president was just appointing people, and that, putting...
Now you could use ChatGPT, just what does a mayor do?
What does a mayor do? So this constant churn and the replacements, it didn't help. And as you all know, a military organization, a unit, is just like a sports team. You need time with your team, you need to practice a lot more. So when you're in the game, blocking and tackling is practiced enough that you know what to do. And if you constantly move somebody, you barely get to know someone's capability and skills, boom, you're changed. And that's what really, there was a time where these provinces, they didn't know who's giving orders. The president's headquarters, which, by the way, commander-in-chief, had lost the control. And only people like Sami, who had his own team and leadership and skills to say, okay, we're fighting for the right cause, and everybody followed these orders. The other provinces, they just didn't know what to do.
Tom, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I want to weigh on the impact of the contractors. Because one thing that people don't really recognize about the legacy of Afghanistan is it kind of became a privatized war in many regards. At the end of the film, which we won't see because we had to cut it for brevity, but within the final end credits, there's a remark that said, 6,000 Americans were killed. 3.5 thousand of those were the contractors. So obviously they're having a huge impact on the war there. But beyond that, they were all pulled out within the span of, all 17,000 at the time, span of a month or so. So we essentially, the US government essentially, created a state where the Afghan forces were reliant on this force, on these support mechanisms to, keep the helicopters flying, to repair their weapons, to, maintain the night vision, maintain their radios, maintain all these little things that kind of keep, your security apparatus on its feet. And these guys were gone within a span of weeks, days. And how can you expect a military to thrive without their logistics? Look at the Ukrainian war right now. Like, what happens when that logistics train gets broken? Just chaos. Just absolute chaos.
That's an important point, yeah.
Can I just
Yeah.
make one?
One point about the Ukrainian example is a good example, and we're rubbed in our face saying that, Ukrainians stood up and they fought. The United States Secretary of State has continuously called our president to resign, and continuously it was on the news, the United States President and Secretary of State would say, Afghans are corrupt, they're not doing that. What happens if President Biden had a press interview today and they said Zelensky is corrupt? I bet you it will not take another week before the Russians are walking in Kiev.
Well, let's see our last clip. I wanted to ask Tom, so the media portrayed the final evacuation at the Kabul airport as chaotic. What is your perspective?
It's far worse. Matt Heineman and Tim Khoshal, the director and cinematographer of the documentary, do a very good job of capturing that. But that's just like through the perspective, just like one lens, a single person. I saw this kind of through the perspective, through my little command station, my laptop, and external monitors back in Western Washington, kind of trying to navigate a non-combatant evacuation operation from my living room. And this was replicated, tens of thousands of times over across the United States. So to call it anything less than chaotic it's not a matter of like not knowing what's going on. It's just straight up being just disingenuous, pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. Because the truth is, we should never have been put in that situation. It should not be kind of incumbent upon American veterans, civilians, and their Afghan counterparts to be pulling a government-sized load, putting it on their shoulders, which we're still doing here today, 20 months later.
Good points. So despite the efforts of all of you gentlemen and many others, of course there were many Afghan soldiers and civilians who worked with Americans who remain in Afghanistan. What do we know about the circumstances that they face?
Definitely not getting any better, to put it mildly. Pakistan's closing their borders. Not quite closing the borders, but they are getting less tolerant because they have a massive refugee problem, not to mention their own internal policies are kind of complementing the situation right now. Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan want no part of this. Tajikistan is the geography is very inhospitable to any kind of migratory movements. Iran, that's a non-starter just because of our political alignments right now. So what do we do now? The answer to that is it's kind of really time to, I'm not gonna say the word mobilize, but time to kind of like lend support to like this next generation, like these guys right here, and Chris Abayat, Maram Solomon, some of these younger people who not only know the way forward, but they were this close. They were waiting in the wings the entire time. They just needed a chance to actually kind of assume that mantle of control. I was at one of these screenings last year, actually, and someone asked me from the audience, why are we fighting? That's exactly what they were saying, like that generational shift. Generational shift does not happen in 20 years. I get it, like the Afghanistan war had to change in some manner, it had to end at some point. But right at the cusp of actual change, it was not the right answer.
So could you tell us a little more about the 1208 Foundation and your work?
Yeah, so 1208 Foundation refers, our core focus is Afghan Special Operations, particularly the SIV, Special Immigrant Visa population who work directly for Special Forces. Like I said, the National Violent Reduction Group is our kind of our core focus because they've been kind of underrepresented and just to be honest with you, just really not well known. And to that effect, some people kind of wonder, like, why is this worth their effort? Why is this particular humanitarian movement worth their effort more so than anyone else? And to be honest, I don't really have a good answer for that. However, I will say this. More so than any other effort out there, you see the direct results of it. Within that film right there, I can point to Matt Cheney, the bald guy, the Special Forces boss. He's the chairman of my board. The breakup scene in the first clip when the Americans announced their Afghan counterparts, that was the NMRG, that they were leaving. That was my old former interpreter from Kandahar providing the translations. Some of the Green Berets, I went to the qualification course with these guys. Habib, one of the NRG in the scene, he was the literal reason why 1208 got formed in the first place. We were kind of an assortment of Special Forces guys. Habib got detained, tortured into revealing the location of several other NRG members, and we kind of had to mobilize to find a way to get these survivors into Pakistan and kind of get them in safe houses and find a way out for them, which we've had actually more success than most have, but we have a long way to go.
Is there anyone here from the Moines refugee support? Would someone be comfortable coming up and saying a few words about your work with refugees and particularly Afghan refugees? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm with Des Moines Refugee Support, and a lot of the people here are also volunteers. I'm sorry, that was very emotional for me, let alone our Afghan friends. But we have really stepped up with the resettlement of Afghan refugees in the Des Moines area, and it has been a heck of an 18-month period here, just doing all we can. We expected our government to be more supportive after what we just saw. But unfortunately, there's been very little support from like federal agencies and state agencies. So we have really had to step up and do all that we can, which involves everything from taking them food, taking them to medical appointments, helping them access different resources, finding housing that is safe. All that stuff has kind of been overlooked. So we have been working really hard. We have an amazing group of volunteers in the Des Moines community. It grows by the day, and I just feel like it's the least we can do after what these people have given the cause on our behalf. So,
how can folks?
I just want to say how glad we are that you're here and that you're safe, and we wish that was true for all of your people.
Thank you for your time.
So,
Thank you.
how can folks help out?
So we always need help. So I'm glad you asked. Thank you. Facebook is the main way that we communicate our needs. We have a closed volunteer group called DMRS Volunteers, and that's where we post our day-to-day needs. And we need so much help. So please consider getting involved. We would love to have you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have some time, about 15 minutes, for questions from the audience. I'd like to ask you to stand when you ask your question, if you don't mind, and state your name, and of course, keep your questions brief, and if you're, let us know to whom you are directing your question. So, the first one I saw, so.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Niazi. I am from Iowa. I live here for 10 years, and it's very nice to meet you. These two unprofessional, unethical,
and professional and ethical thugs. You, Sami, Sadat, and you, Khoshal. You both are. Yes, he is Khoshal. He is Khoshal. You are Sami. You are an embarrassment to Afghanistan. We have lost over 70,000 people because of your unethical and professional management. You are an embarrassment. You should apologize to us taxpayers here. تاسې د افغانستان د خلکو نمائندګي نشئ کولی. تاسې په هیڅ صورت نشئ کولی دلته راسئ او خپل دا کثافات دلته شروع کړئ. موږ تاسو ته ضرورت نه لرو. تاسې پلاستیکي جنرالان وکړه. تاسې هیڅ دې وطن خلکو نه تاسو
Okay.
I
will please ask for us to have order.
Give us an opportunity from the Afghan community members who have been through all this journey.
Okay, but I would like to request that we don't make personal attacks on anyone.
I'll do that. Thank you. I will consider that. Thank you so much for everyone coming here, taking your food. Your precious time coming here. My question is from Tom, but I need not to be very brief because that won't help us what I'm asking. So, my name is Fazal. I'm one of the interpreters in Afghanistan, and I've been through this journey, and now I work in the state government. Thanks God. So, my question will be asked at the end of what I'm going to initiate first. For 20 years, the United States went to Iraq. It lost the war. Because obviously, we will be very honest here. The media tells us everything. No one can answer the question that is asked, like why we went to Iraq. There is no specific answer for it, so we lost it. Prior to that, we went to Afghanistan to eliminate Taliban, overthrow Taliban governments, get our target, Osama bin Laden. We did that eventually, and then mission was completed. And Afghanistan was gone, we went back to the United States. So basically we lost because we didn't eliminate the current government of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is still Afghanistan when it was 20 or 30 years ago, still fighting. So unfortunately a lot of lives lost on both sides, Afghanistan, Iraq, and also the servicemen of the United States. So my question is, people who have lost lives, I have a gentleman there with the kid. He's been a marksman for 20 years, and he openly challenges every citizen of the United States. If someone could hit a target of 2 square meters in 850 meters, I bet no one could fulfill that challenge, and he does. I have a gentleman who was a bomb disposal unit, and his hands are affected by the explosive he was exposed to. And
so please,
let me,
question.
Yeah.
Question.
And I hope such other gentlemen that have lost lives, widows that have lost husbands, and very many things. Yeah, on the internet we do advocate that we couldn't help Afghanistan. But what about people who are already here, like him and some others? And there are very big bureaucracies involved in the process.
We appreciate your remarks, but other people want to ask questions.
So Tom, my question is what the United States veterans are doing on behalf of these veterans, which I would not say contract men or any Afghans who were working on behalf of the United States. But I see them as Gold Star family members, which are the United States veterans. What are you doing for these people? Thanks so much.
A lot. Yeah, we're doing. So my background is, I was a Green Beret on active duty, 13 years, transitioned from the National Guard right now. I left the Army on August 23rd, 2021, so I went straight from active duty into this. I actually left the Army specifically to go to med school. So I have no background in humanitarian work whatsoever. Like, I'm the executive director of an NGO, but I barely even know what an NGO does. I'm learning everything I'm doing right now on the fly. So we have to find some very creative solutions because it's not our forte, and as we've seen like the past 20 years or 20 months, our government's not listening to us. So we have to find ways to build things from the ground up. We have my deputy director, like Dave Elliott, for example. He's running safe houses from his couch in Pakistan. We're building a community in Spokane, Washington. If you're not familiar with Spokane, it's on the eastern side, kind of like that desert area. To specifically circumvent some of the shortcomings of the special immigrant visa process. There's other veteran organizations who are providing, healthcare, grants for like automobiles, grants for business startups. Actually, in many cases, one of my volunteers actually is literally housing an Afghan interpreter. So we are doing everything we can, but it's just not enough because there aren't enough of us, and we're not getting the support we need.
Okay, let's take another question. Way in the back. Speak up loudly.
Can I just make a comment quickly?
Oh, sure.
For my Afghan brothers, if you can remain behind after the American friends left, we have a separate discussion. أفغانان ورونه چې د لیدي تاسو کښینئ د نور ملګري خلاص موږ تاسو خپل مجلس لرو. وزست په شزه کې د
خلاص خور مور وخمه هغه خدای ما دی ولا نزيد تشپا ورځ غمه کونی ستاغه د کوس ور کوي ټول ورځ مور لگا ولا سي تاسو د زغه مزید خدياري با
صافي
please
چا اوسته د خديار دي زيما تاسو د بنا موسه وکړه.
Okay. Sorry. Peace. Okay. In the very
you will ask later when we are
very back row.
Okay. Can I have my question with my native language? Is it possible?
I will translate for you.
Okay, thank you. کماندان صاحب خودت مسئول زون جنوب و جنوب غرب بودی. کماندان صاحب سادات، البته دبل سادات است، سفال سیمتی که داریم. خودت مسئول نظامی زون جنوب و جنوب غرب بودی. 22,000 نیرو داشتی، همراه سلاح، تجهیزات مکمل، تمام چیزا. قبل از اینکه پوسته، کندک، ما این فیلم را کلش دیدیم سقوط کرد. خون اولاد غریب اینقدر اوگین بود و اینقدر مطرح نبود پیش شما که قبل از اینکه سکوت بکنه چرا قد نشینی نمیکردین، چرا ساحه را تخلیه نمیکردین؟ علت اینمی چی بود؟ و یک موضوع دیگه ای که سلاح، امکانات، تجهیزات تمام نگهبانتان در زون جنوب، تنها زون جنوب از طالب کده بالا بود یا پایین بود؟ اگر بالا بود نتیجه، اگر پایین بود چرا گپ شد؟ تشکر.
I think this is a good, very good question. It's a tactical question about the fight. But we are going to have a gathering after this with all of our Afghan brothers and sisters here. And then we will go deep dive to our own native language. So we'll encourage Americans who have questions. And then once that's finished, we can have a gathering with our Afghan brothers and sisters. And we'll have a long talk. We can, without punching each other, we can talk.
Okay, no
encouraging
punching.
Americans.
No punching.
من می‌خوایم شما را تایم همراه خود داشته باشیم. درست. لطفاً. تشکر.
Okay, sir.
My name's Craig Bollinger. I live in Iowa. Really weird, simple question. How did the Afghans get all of their military supplies and their weapons? Where'd they get them from?
Now?
No, during the war.
Oh, during the war we got it from the United States.
No, not you guys. The Taliban.
Oh,
Taliban. Sorry.
During the war, remember when 2001 when the United States was attacked, the United States came to Afghanistan and asked for help. On that day, still northeastern Afghanistan was held by the resistance force led by Professor Rabbani. And we joined the United States, not only going after the Taliban, but actually we went after the United States enemies as well in that region. Al-Qaeda, the terrorist groups, Pakistanis, Iranians and all that. And it kind of ignited them to help our enemies as well. So Pakistan was in bed all over. Pakistan is the #1 single reason why Taliban came back to Afghanistan. They gave them weapons. Iranians gave them weapons. Even sometimes the Sam surface-to-air missiles that shot our helicopters a couple of times in eastern Afghanistan. After the Doha Agreement, we now believe that the government of Qatar has paid hundreds of millions of dollars to the Taliban to arm and prepare and buy kit, tactical military-grade kit, to fight the Afghan government. There is news about Russians and Chinese helping the Taliban as well. We don't know that. There was sympathy for them for sure, but we cannot confirm or deny whether or not they were also providing some sort of support. But the Pakistani government provided them intelligence, safe haven, weapons, training, guidance, and everything they needed for the fight.
Thank you.
Ma'am, did you have a question?
Yeah, my question, my name is Tina Newsom. I'm a volunteer with Des Moines Refugee Support. And this is my adopted Afghan family. I'm a grandma to 13 children. I feel very blessed. And but my question is, and Tom, I don't know if you work with this, but the SID application. Rahmat put his in many months ago, and you would think that the SID applications would be the ones that would be expedited and top priority, and he has not heard anything back at all. So now we're doing the asylum one, but it's so unfair that here he worked so hard, sacrificed so much, gave up so much, and now he's being pretty much ignored by our government with that.
Yeah, so the question is kind of, why is it that the government is so slow to process these SDI visas? And maybe, Tom, as you answer the question, you could tell us a little bit what these visas are.
Yes, special immigrant visa is granted specifically towards Afghan citizens who are directed from the United States, so not for the government, in other words. Usually the threshold currently is, I think it's down 1 year of service, and passes to the initial SIV program was. I wish I could help you, but that is par for the course. And as far as vetting goes, as far as the entire process goes, it's just not computing with UCIS, NBC, the National Visa Center, the State Department. Once again, my publisher, the National Mine Reduction Group, these guys have all the vetting in the world. They were, one of the chief chief risks to U.S. service members always those green or blue attacks. These guys literally carry backpacks full of explosives, AK-47s, pistols on our bases at all times. So that they have polygraphs, all sorts of other high-end security clearance essentially approaching like the top secret level. Doesn't matter to them. I wish I knew why. I wish I knew how to kind of streamline the process, but we are routinely getting our own recommendations kicked back left and right for simple things because of the date format. Date format's I would say probably the #1 rejection right now. If I put January 2017 is not the same as January 15th, 2017. And that's the concise difference. I very, very literally hand on the Bible, swear to God that we've seen that happen time and time again. And to begin with, remember, some of these guys have started working for the US in 2002. We don't know the exact date they started, so I'll put 01 January 2002, 2004, 2005, and that will go through. So they don't know what's going on. It's purely a bureaucratic tangle right now.
Okay.
So you're saying our government, as usual, is nimble and organized and caring?
Yes.
As usual. Yes. Okay. Well, folks, one more? Okay.
One more, yes.
One more.
Actually, this will,
Okay.
because you guys didn't talk about what is going on under the Taliban rule right now. Like, what are the women going through? What are the soldiers who are left behind going through? Is anyone helping them right now? And by the way, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Nabi Mohamedi. I'm a former U.S. Army translator, a U.S. citizen now, and I have been volunteer with different organizations for the last 2 years, and I feel like a brother and sister for every Afghan here, and they 90% know me. And watching the videos, it got me emotional. And I hope that that was the way that we can redo everything, but I know we can't do that. And women are half of our society, no matter where you are. So what is going on right now? Could you guys shed light a little bit for the audience here? And also, we know that there is a resistance that's still going on in Afghanistan. No one talks about it. Because yesterday we lost a family member from our own where I was born. You probably know, I saw your post about him and about Amir. And so, I mean, he was one who was left behind, and he won't be the last one who's gonna be murdered by the Taliban. And I know everything you guys said. I have a word for it. There was a betrayal of the U.S. first, then your own government, your own president, who I can say run away. Are you going to still support the same mission? Both of you. Are you going to support? And could you please talk about, Sami, please talk about, are you guys, do you have any plan on, are you guys working on getting those soldiers out? And what is, I mean, I know why you guys are here. What is the main reason for being here?
Good questions.
So yeah, especially the issue of the water conditions, like for people in Afghanistan, including women, especially, that would be an important question. And then the purpose of your tour, why you're here, what you're trying to accomplish. That would also be an important thing.
Thank you. I'll get a shot at it. Under the Taliban, the Afghan security forces are the most affected people in Afghanistan. They're being tortured, systematically targeted, detained for unknown reasons, killed every day, and they've been videoed as they're shot in front of the cameras, and the videos are circulating wide around. For women, unfortunately, it's been worse. They have no right to go out of a house without a male chaperone. They have no right for education. They have no right to work. They have no right to travel. This is a draconian way of life that in 2023, no country in the world is like Afghanistan. No regime in the world is like Taliban. Unfortunately, the economy has fallen. There's no civil services. The civic rights are being curtailed for men and women both. And unfortunately, it's going to get even worse. Instead of that, international terrorism, the likes of Al-Qaeda, is being brought back to Afghanistan, as evident by Zawahiri's presence in Kabul, 200 meters away from the British Embassy. And Zawahiri is dead, yes, good news, but his deputies, his entire entourage, around 40,000 Al-Qaeda loyalists are in Afghanistan today. They're training and preparing. There's 800 Al-Qaeda commanders alone. I can give you an example of what can they do. In the 1997, there was like 10 Al-Qaeda senior members. It was Bin Laden, Zawahiri, Saif al-Adil, who is now the leader of Al-Qaeda. It was al-Baghdadi, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who became the leader of ISIS. It was Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who became the butcher of Iraq. It was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who masterminded the 9/11. And then it was Khalid Batrafi, who's now the leader of Al-Qaeda in the Arab world. There's a couple of guys, semi-intellectual, a little bit military background. Today there is 800 of Al-Qaeda commanders like them. And we know what happened after they were given refuge. They're preparing for attacks overseas. These guys are battle-hardened. They fought the United States, they fought the NATO, they know how to fight, and they have a generational relationship with the Afghan Taliban. So there is nothing to stop them. Second thing is, Afghans continue to stand up and fight against the Taliban in a form of an armed resistance. As my brother mentioned, Akmal Amir, one of our JSOC operators, was unfortunately killed, as it says. We're still working out to identify his body. Hopefully he has escaped. But if not, with a couple of other commandos in a mountain where they were preparing to fight the Taliban. There is the Afghan National Resistance Front, who's also fighting with very limited resources, also implying former Afghan special forces. And the soldiers who remain there, unfortunately, there's very little hope for them to go outside Afghanistan to the US or Europe. The system is just not working. So what we want to do, and why we are in the US for this mission, is to talk to our Afghan and American brothers, the veterans especially, and to organize ourselves and go back and liberate our country. We love America. It's a beautiful country. It's a great country. The greatness of America, as much as the betrayal of President Biden was displayed all the same time on TV, Biden leaving Afghans to the situation where it was, with our own president, of course, but then the great American people standing up, stepping up, reaching the hand to help the Afghans on the other side, to bring them here. Even today, I'm very blessed and happy to see that volunteers are still working to integrate the Afghans here. This is great. This is why Americans are great. And I think you should be proud of that. We saw that. We will remember that. And we will never forget what you did for the Afghans. Afghans are not ungrateful. We're grateful. We're quite capable, but unfortunately we came under stress of the history and things didn't work the way it should work. So we're a group of young Afghan politicians and generals working hard with American volunteers and globally actually volunteers to help mobilize a force and go back and free our country. There is no way we can rescue all those who are left behind. The only way to help every Afghan is to go back and defeat the Taliban and take our country back. In this, we do not ask permission from the United States or any other country, but we will welcome any kind of help that we will get in this quest.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I was hoping that you would ask what's next, and you readily asked. And why are we here? This is the 6th state we've come to. After the collapse, most of our top soldiers, the fighters, I'm talking about the KKA, the pilots, the night raiders, who many have said hello to already. That's right. They've come here. We really are here to see and to tell you that we have to go back. We have to fight. Yes, it's a short period that we've spent time here. Yes, we're extremely grateful for what the Americans are helping us with. But essentially, we have to defend our country. We cannot get everybody out. The U.S. and the world can't get 30 million, 35 million people out. We've seen what the Taliban tyranny is doing. They are brutalizing people. Their governance is very visible to everybody. The thousands of terrorists and networks that are there, it's very obvious. It's a time-ticking bomb. I know it's going to go off one day. The West is going to be attacked. That's just the fact. But the American government betrayed us. The American people helped us. And that we have to be grateful to them. And this is going to be slow. We're going state by state. Well, most states we know where our top guys are. We're going to have to get to see how many are willing to go back and when. We have a timeline and where we're going to start from. The reason why we're here is the U.S. has actually, Sami, you probably remember Sami could not go to Turkey. He was turned around from the airport. The UAE did not allow him to fly into that country because we are seen as a insurgent. Essentially, we're now seen as an insurgent. We're preparing to fight back the 2 years ago insurgents. So what we don't want them is to label us as insurgents. Let us get equipment, let us buy technology, let us prepare our force to free our country. It really is softening the mindset of people and the Americans to essentially pressure the American government to say, let these people go and fight. We don't have another option. I'm sorry? Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
All right, well, I know we have more questions, but we also have run out of time. First of all, I want to remind folks that the Sami and Khosh have invited the members of the Afghan community to stay afterwards, and I think it would be helpful if you would come down front and kind of sit close, and to make that easier. Those who are not staying, if we could expedite our exit to make that a little easier. But I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their experience and their perspective, and it was fascinating to hear everything you had to offer us tonight. And the film is, of course, an excellent film. I hope you all check it out. It's called Retrograde. So thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I mean, those have one meter. Those have 1 meter.